All right, welcome to Unit 4, Lesson 4 on the efficiency of monopolistic competition. Just really one more thing to touch on this market structure of monopolistic competition, and this will end our study of market structures. This is the last lesson in the unit, and the last before we move on to other topics outside of market structure. So we're going to do a little summarizing of market structures overall as well. So first let's start with the efficiency concept. Remember that we defined efficiency in a couple different ways. We have allocative efficiency, which means that firms are producing at where the price is equal to the marginal cost of production. So remember that perfect competition is both allocatively and productively efficient. In perfect competition, the price of the good is equal to the marginal cost of the good at the profit maximizing output. And that's where they'll produce, in the long run, equilibrium. And productive efficiency means that firms are producing at the minimum average total cost. They're producing the stuff as cheaply as possible, with the least resources used possible. And that's true also in perfect competition because in long-run equilibrium, ATC is at its minimum where it cuts through MC. All three of these intersect at the same point. So P is equal to minimum ATC at the profit maximizing quantity in perfect competition. Perfect competition is perfect in that it's perfectly efficient in both of these ways. So let's look at this compare. We did a comparison with monopoly when we studied monopoly. Let's look at the comparison with monopolistic competition. And as you can probably guess, since the graphs look kind of the same, monopolistic competition is not going to meet these efficiency qualities either. So we're just going to talk through a little bit about how we can show that on a graph and why that is in conceptual terms. So this is the same slide you saw in the last lesson, how monopolistic competitors end up in the long run at the break-even point, where ATC is tangent to the point at which they're producing on the demand curve. That means they're making economic, they're breaking even in terms of economic profits. They're making accounting profits. So they're continuing to stay in business. And this is an equilibrium point because since there's no economic profits being made, there's no incentive for firms to enter or to exit the market. So it's fairly stable, and the picture of this would be along 86th Street with fast food restaurants. If they're all fairly stable, as long as you're running a decent business, you can stay in business. If there's maybe a dozen or 16 or 20 of them along 86th Street, they're all staying in business. They're all making minimum, small amount of profit, and they're in a stable kind of long-run equilibrium. The question for us today is that an efficient situation in economic terms? So let's look at our couple of ways that we define efficiency: allocative and productive efficiency. And for this, let's move down to now the comparison. The next slide, the last one here for this unit, where it puts next to each other perfect competition on the left and monopolistic competition on the right, both in long-run equilibrium. And this perfect competition graph on the left basically replicates what I sketched up here. And again, in perfect competition, we're at this point where we're both allocatively and productively efficient, producing at the minimum cost output, minimum ATC. So that means they're productively efficient, and we're allocatively efficient because we're producing where the price is equal to the marginal cost of production. However, if an industry is monopolistically competitive, then we've got this graph that looks, this is again a copy of this graph here. In long-run equilibrium, we're producing where ATC is tangent to the demand curve. Firms are breaking even. There's one thing that's wrong on this graph, so be careful of this. In the book it's right, but somehow the slides that were provided by the textbook is wrong. This is not the minimum cost output. Hopefully you can notice why that is. So it's not the minimum cost output, because the minimum cost output is where ATC is minimized. And it's minimized here, where ATC crosses marginal cost, the marginal cost curve. So here would be minimum cost output, or the minimum ATC quantity. This is the profit maximizing quantity that the firm is producing. We say profit maximizing even if they're breaking even. So what we see here is the quantity that the monopolistically competitive firm is producing is less than the minimum cost output. What this would look like in real life is that we would say that this the fast food that's being produced along 86th Street is being produced not quite as cheaply as it could be, believe it or not, because it's produced pretty cheaply. But it's not produced quite as cheaply as it could be because firms are not producing at their minimum cost level. They're holding back production a little bit from the minimum cost level in order to maximize their profits, and they're able to do that because they have a little bit of market power. That little bit of market power gives them the ability to determine the price, and the way that they compete is by trying to increase their quality so that people choose their fast food over the other fast food. They're not competing based on price mainly. If they were, they'd be driving the price down to the minimum possible level, and they'd be more close to or at the minimum cost output. So again, back to this graph, we can see if we look for, is it allocatively efficient? Does price equal marginal cost? Well, here's the price that the firms are charging. Here is the marginal cost of production. So no, the price is greater than the marginal cost, so not allocatively efficient. And in terms of productive efficiency, we've already said, here's the price. Here would be the minimum cost, price and quantity. So the price that the firm is producing at is greater than the minimum average total cost of production. So it's not productively efficient either. And one more phrase that's used specifically about this productive efficiency and about this fact here, the fact that the monopolistic competitive firm is producing a lower quantity than its minimum cost output. This is known as, in monopolistic competition, excess capacity. The firm has excess capacity that it's not utilizing. It's got the ability to produce more at a cheaper production price, but it's not doing so in order to maximize its profits. It would be more efficient, in other words, if there were less firms, less fast food restaurants on 86th Street, producing a little bit more each. Maybe they'd be bigger restaurants. Maybe they'd be more full more of the time. You go into any of those restaurants, there's a lot of times where there's very few people in there. How is that efficient? It would be more efficient if we were to combine everybody who needed fast food on 86th Street into less restaurants, maybe even into one. But that's not the case. And is that good or bad in terms of efficiency? Well, it's bad in one sense. It's bad in that they're not producing at the minimum average total cost. In one sense, there's probably too many fast food restaurants. On the other hand, what we haven't quantified in here, and your book gets into this well, is there's a benefit to having options out there and choice for consumers. And we pay for that choice. That's part of why we are willing to pay a little bit more than a competitive level for something like fast food. We pay for choice, and we're willing to do it, and we're happy to do that. Again, every transaction benefits both buyer and seller. So the question of whether monopolistic competition is good or bad for consumers, in one sense, remember, efficiency is trying to lead us in economics to the idea that if everything's efficient, it's kind of best off for society. So there's some sense in which monopolistic competition is not as good for society, overall benefit as perfect competition. But it's a little hazy exactly how much worse it is, and it's really not that much worse. And most consumers, we would say, are happy with the amount of choice that they have out there, which if it was a perfectly competitive world, they wouldn't have as much choice. They'd have more standardized products. There'd be less advertising, which might be nice, but there wouldn't be as much consumer choice. So the main technical things you need to know about monopolistic competition are how to explain and define and show on a graph how it does not meet these productive and allocative efficiency standards, and explain what this term means, because this does tend to come up. What does it mean that a monopolistic competitor has excess capacity? It means they're producing at a level, at an output that's less than their productively efficient level. They have excess that's being unutilized or underutilized. Okay, last thing that we'll do here is to do a quick kind of summary of these four market structures. I've kind of shown this a couple times in class and on these video lessons, and let's sum up. If we can see the market structures, our four market structures is a continuum. From on the left-hand side is a perfect monopoly, and on the right-hand side the extreme of perfect competition, starting over there. Then all the way across, any real market usually falls somewhere in the middle here. And along this continuum, we can define some things. Like obviously on the left-hand side, we have less firms, down to one at the very end, and on the right-hand side, we have more firms. And it grows greater and greater as we go, right? Few firms in oligopoly, many firms in monopolistic competition, and many firms in perfect competition. We could say the same thing, although going in the other direction, about profits and market power. Monopoly has the most market power. Perfect competition has the least market power, has no market power, those firms. And again, that kind of increases along the spectrum, from the least in perfect competition to the most in monopoly. Same with profits. Monopolies are going to make the most profits. And the competitive firms are going to make, of course, the least profits. Barriers to entry. The highest barriers to entry exist in monopoly, that's what makes monopoly possible. And the lowest, no barriers to entry exist in perfect competition. Again, less barriers to entry in monopolistic competition, more barriers to entry in oligopoly, and most barriers to entry in monopoly. And in terms of efficiency, so perfect competition is the most efficient. Monopoly is the least efficient. And it continues from there. It gets more efficient the closer it gets to perfect competition. So there's some generalizations we can make about these four market structures. Clearly, we've seen that monopoly is kind of a situation where we usually shouldn't allow unless it's a natural monopoly because of the drawbacks and the inefficiencies and cost to society of that. Perfect competition tends to be best for society, but the conditions in which it has to operate are fairly rare. And both oligopoly and monopolistic competition have elements of it that are not overall bad for consumers. So while the efficiency is maximized in perfect competition, we have many products that we buy and that work well for our economy that are produced in both monopolistic, competitive, and oligopolistic scenarios. And hopefully our study of this has given you a sense of what the differences are and how that explains some of what you see in terms of behavior from firms and companies and even consumers that you see out there in the real world. Okay, we'll stop there and see you in class.